Welcome to Building While Flying, a Sasha Group podcast where we interview business leaders about how they tackle challenges, stay resilient, and navigate ever-changing skies.
Hello, we are back on the Building While Flying podcast. This week, Maribel speaks with Jacquelyn Rodgers, founder of Greentop Gifts. Growing up, Jacquelyn remembers that her mother put Christmas trees in every corner of their house, painting angels and Santa figurines to look like their family for the holidays. They created memories from those moments, and those memories are part of the inspiration behind Greentop Gifts. Greentop Gifts brings diversity to your celebrations with apparel, home decor, and stationery. They began in 2016 making Christmas products solely for their 2-year-old son, and then continued to spread joy to thousands of other households across the U.S., expanding to other holidays and special celebrations. Their products have been featured on NBC News, People Magazine, and the Oprah Magazine. Maribel, I knew immediately when we got connected to Jacquelyn that I wanted you to speak with her. I feel like her values and the root of Greentop Gifts is so special and something we don't come across every day in our work. Maybe talk a little bit about what stood out to you about Jackie and Greentop Gifts and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think what's really special about what Jackie and her husband have created is that it speaks to an emotional need, right? We are living in a time and space where there's lots of conversations about people feeling included, right? And people feeling seen. And that is at the heart of what Jackie created, right? We have products and services up the wazoo that meet all of our needs, but they are not necessarily representative of like all of the different facets of identity that exist in society. And at our core, as humans, we strive to feel seen, right? And so, it's such a simple thing to want to, see a character in a movie, in a cartoon that you feel a little connected to, right? We like it's just a human need. And so she saw that, right? Like she wanted her son to have Santa wrapping paper where Santa looked like somebody in his family, right? Like somebody like who he could almost see himself in, right? Like when we see ourselves like physically in the people around us, in the characters around us, like it creates this sense of aspiration of like, oh, like I want to embody some of those traits. And so it was really like poignant and special and not surprisingly something that other people wanted to see as well, right? When she started to have those conversations, it was sort of a like, oh my gosh, yes, like I've had that thought too. Like, please do that and please let me partake of that as well. So, that's what makes it so special. And that to me is like what made it such an incredible conversation. And I'm excited for people to see like how she went about doing it because you don't just like overnight figure out how to do this thing that like isn't even in your wheelhouse. And then how she expanded on that concept.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like something we discuss a lot is anybody can have an idea, but it's that person who recognizes this is a gap and then goes for it. And Jacquelyn really went for it, and I'm so happy that it's taken off, and I feel like it's only onwards and upwards from here. Well, let's not keep our listeners waiting. Let's dive into Jackie's episode with Maribel.
Jacquelyn, thank you so much for joining us on the Building While Flying podcast. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. So getting to know your background from our producer was my introduction to Greentop Gifts. And I'm telling you, I'm going to be buying from here on in. So for our listeners who may not know the story behind Greentop Gifts or know of you personally, give us the highlights.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Greentop Gifts really started with my son. I had him in 2014. And my mom growing up always made sure we had, paper or angels or Easter bunnies. Everything looked like our family in our house. So growing up, it was always a party. And my mom was really intentional to make sure we saw images that looked like us, even in Santa Claus, right? And so when I had my son, I started to look for products like that to share those moments with him. Couldn't find any in stores. Looked all over and realized, okay, we are not being serviced. There's a void here in the market, and I'm going to go to Kinko's or FedEx and figure it out and make some for myself. And that kind of turned into a business. And then that turned into 2 pallets of paper being delivered to my garage. And then it really grew from there. But that is what started it.
So you created a product, right? Greentop Gifts started with your creation of a product in a category that you weren't experienced in. It wasn't like you were working for a gift wrap company and you were like, I see an opportunity to design my own and here I go. So I would imagine there was a lot of education that had to happen in probably a speedy amount of time. Like, tell us about that process. Like, where did you even know how to start?
I'll say all the time, Google. I knew I love stationery. I bought tons of stationery. I bought tons of greeting cards and wrapping paper, and I love any celebration. You can ask my friends if it's a holiday in a moment, we celebrate it in my house. But I knew nothing about how to manufacture gift wrap. And so I got on Google, I found some videos, I learned enough of the terminology to sound dangerous, okay? And then I called up some manufacturers and asked about getting some designs done, and a few were like, yeah, we don't do that. And one took a chance on me, and I kind of act like I knew what I was talking about, and he was going along with it, and he's like, are you going to sell this? Or are you just going to give it away? And I was like, no, I want to sell it. And so he was kind enough to be very patient with me and explain the parts that I didn't get from YouTube. And from there, I now have learned a ton about the industry and about manufacturing and how it all works. But in the beginning, I knew nothing. But I knew what I liked.
You had this vision of Clarence Claus and what your wrapping paper would look like. You were undergoing this process of creating wrapping paper to sell. From the get-go, were you like, did you know that this was something you wanted to sell and eventually make into a business that you could transition to working at full-time? Because you were working a full-time job, and it's now, this is now your full-time job as I understand it. And you're also working with your spouse. Was that the vision from the get-go? And if not, like, how did that vision evolve?
From the get-go, it was really, I just wanted it for my son. I was going to make it on Photoshop, print it, and just wrap his gifts in it. And then my husband has a background in finance. I started talking to friends in a focus group, and my friends were all saying, well, if you make whatever you're making, I think I want it too. And so from there, I was like, okay, there are other parents that are looking for items like these and who are looking for diversity and representation. And then as I continued to talk to my husband about it and we talked about investing in it, he was like, well, what's the size of the market? And so once, I said it was an $8.5 billion industry, then he was definitely on board at that point. And working with a spouse, to answer your question, I have learned to communicate very effectively, and I've learned when to cut it off and when to start talking about it. So we figured out the right times and the wrong times. And we've been married a long time, and I would say that it's definitely, you learn how to communicate with your spouse when you're in business with your spouse. My background was a CPG. So I double Dutch for a long time. I worked in sales and marketing, and it's for some, huge brands. I worked for like Nestle and Mars Wrigley. And so I was selling products into large retail stores, but they weren't my products, obviously. They were household names people were very familiar with and loved. So I used a lot of that experience to help me with growing and scaling my own company.
So I don't want to just quickly move past that, because that decision right there can be tremendously scary, right? And in my opinion, that decision right there is the thing that differentiates entrepreneurs from folks who are not, because you had the safety, right? Well, there's never something that is 100% secure, but you had a significant amount of security in your career, having been very established working for large consumer packaged good companies, and you walked away from that. So one, to me, that's the boldness, right? That makes you an entrepreneur. How did you make that decision?
I wrestled with it. It did not come easy. I had worked for my whole life since I could get a work permit right out of high school. I was working, and then right out of college, I worked. So for over, 13 years, I had a corporate job. I traveled. I had, you had to fly. You had a company car. You had insurance. All those important things, right? A check every 2 weeks that comes consistently, and a bonus. Yeah. And so to give those things up, I struggle with it, and my husband was like, oh, we have 2 incomes here. You can quit, focus on the business. I think it'll be good for the business if you focus on it. And I knew in order for partnerships, investors, anyone we were working with to take me seriously, I had to commit to the business full time for that to happen. But it's one of those things where, so far so good, but my day job got a lot busier, and the business was growing, and I knew for the business to continue to grow and for me to take part of these opportunities, I couldn't do both. And there were, accelerators and programs for startups, that I wanted to apply for, but I couldn't do it because it was during, working hours. And so once I quit in February of 2020, my only regret is that I didn't quit sooner, because it was the best decision that I could have made. The year that I quit, yes, it was the beginning of the global pandemic, so that was stressful. But we got great opportunities and partnerships from FedEx and from Google and from the Visa and Beyonce.com. So all of those things could have never happened had I still been working.
Amazing. Another thing that I want to dig into that you called out, right? So your husband had experience in finance, and that sounds like it definitely helped to get you asking some really important questions about market size and feasibility, right? And understanding like how you could grow, what revenue could actually look like in building this particular type of business. But it sounds like you also more broadly like reached out into your network. So you're a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I understand that, love. I'm part of a Latina sorority myself. And so I understand how deep those networks and those really family ties can really go. And it sounded like you reached into that network and your friend network more broadly. Talk a little bit more about that. Because again, of the decisions that entrepreneurs make or that people who are starting businesses can make, you can decide I'm going to go on this on my own and I'm not going to bring other people in. Or you can decide to pull people in to support you on that journey. And it sounds like you took that path. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, definitely. I say our network played such an integral role in the launch of our company. Obviously, like you mentioned, sorority sisters. My dear friend and one of my sorority sisters helped me with PR when we first launched because I couldn't afford PR. So she helped me to write the press releases, the pitches for projects, and that was a great help to us. Relied on a lot of friends and college classmates that did focus groups for us and sorority sisters and moms to understand, okay, what's the cost for this product here? What are you looking for? What's the price point you want to pay? What other products do you want? So a lot of focus groups with them. Our attorney, he went to an HBCU with my husband. We do a lot of work with HBCU students that are current students with having them as brand ambassadors during homecoming to get our products and get out to our audience, kind of build brand awareness. So our network, especially our HBCU network, really played a large part in our business. And I'm so thankful for it because they shared it with others. I won't say our first launch went viral, but people shared the video and the excitement from it. It really helped to get the word out. So they played a big part for sure.
Well, and I'm going to give you credit there, right? Because networks don't just appear. Like, we have to foster them. We have to build to them. We have to be willing to ask for their support. But the other reason I think you deserve tremendous credit is you didn't just think about launching a product. Like, you were meeting a real need. You were meeting a need for a community, and people were passionate about it, right? Like, people were willing to support you. I would imagine, I'm putting myself in their shoes, right? Like, we support people who are building brands that mean something to us and mean more than just a transaction or just a particular item. And so that leads me to my next question, which is, right, on your website and some of the content that I've seen, you talk about Greentop Gifts bringing diversity to celebrations. And I think you do so much more than that, right? I think you bring a sense of belonging to people, especially children who rarely get to see themselves reflected in their ethnicity, their culture, right? We just don't all see that around us, right? Or we just see it in spurts. And so this greater purpose, in my opinion, shines through in everything you do. Like every interview of yours that I've watched, that just seems so clear. I feel like that can be an inspiration or it can be really intimidating. What is it for you?
For me, I would say it's an inspiration, but there are moments where it can also be intimidating. For me, I want children that don't see themselves to see themselves. If you walk down the aisles, they're not different skin tones. They're not shades. There's not a lot of difference in the hair texture. And when we work with illustrators on designing these products, there are lots of calls about just hair. Like, okay, well, what does this hair look like? Is it curly enough? Is it the right length? Is there enough texture? Is it the color right? Skin tones, to make sure that there's diversity in the skin tones. If it's a gap in the teeth, if it's freckles, it's so important, I think, for children to see images that look like them so they can connect with them as a source of self-pride. And I love when I hear from people that tell us, oh, my daughter saw this and the first thing she said is, Mommy, that looks like me, or he has, locks like me. And so hearing children seeing that, having that self-reflection and that source of self-pride is so important. It's a huge part about the products that we are creating. But it's also tricky because we want to make sure that we do it in a really authentic way. And as we've expanded and have products that feature children that are Latina, or if they are, Indian, like for Lunar New Year, we did, a post and talked about that. And, going through reviewing it, quality control, making sure it's right, because cancel culture is so real, right? And so you don't want to ever offend someone. You want to make sure that it's authentic and it's bringing representation and celebrating their culture and other people's cultures as well. And so that part does give me a lot of anxiousness because we want to do it in a really authentic, honest way and bring awareness to people so that kids can understand it. And our household is super important. I'm always talking to my kids about other moments and other families' traditions because I think that's what builds children to have this acceptance and understanding of other people and what they experience and what they celebrate in their own homes.
They are tough waters to navigate, but so incredibly important waters to navigate, because if we don't have these conversations, we don't move forward as a society, right? It's so important for us to have these tough conversations, for our kids to learn from them, right? For us to learn from them. I'm such a big fan of what you're doing, right? I'm a grown woman about to be 45 years old, and it still brings me to tears when I see characters on screen that remind me of my own upbringing, right? I can still count on fingers how often I see those images in a given year, even, right? So I recognize that not all of our listeners will connect with that personally. So I hope that these types of stories also help them see the other side of it, right? It's just if you've never had to think about that, then that is a privilege to never have had to think about not seeing people who look like you, or families that represent the things that your family celebrated. So thank you on behalf of folks who haven't always been seen. You talked about how difficult it is, right? In terms of critique, it's very, right? It's just so common, right? People will be like, this is great, but, right? Why didn't you X, Y, and Z? And I did hear an interview with you where you talked about how hard it is to not take that personally, because, this was a personal project. This was a passion project. This was your creation of something to fill a void for your family, and for your extended family and friends. How have you, what's the balance? What does that look like now? Because critique can also be an incredibly powerful thing. Feedback can be so important as you develop a brand, as you develop new product offerings or improve existing product offerings. So how do you manage that now?
I managed a lot better in year 6 than I did in year 1. When you have a startup, it's your baby. Your business is like, this is your art. It's something that you hold dear and you've invested your time and your money, So for me in the beginning, I took everything personally and I would be so upset or so worried if somebody's order if it wasn't exactly what they wanted, or if it didn't arrive on time, or if they just didn't like it, or they didn't like the quality, and I would take it to heart. And then I learned to dial back, and I don't look at reviews every day. We get them. I don't dive into them every day. And there's a customer service team now, so I'm not having to respond to customer service. But for the most part, I would say the good outweighs the bad. People definitely tell us, I haven't seen anything like this. My children connect with it. They're so excited to have it. I'm a parent. I'm looking for the representation, or I've adopted a child of color, I'm looking for this stuff now, or I'm a grandparent. So hearing those things definitely are encouraging. But, you also have to take some of the feedback. Our customers wanted a larger roll of paper. And so we answered that need, there are always things they want, new product. They want to see different things. And so some of the feedback is good. And then some of it is just, you can't please everyone. Everyone's not always happy. And I also have learned that I can't serve every customer. Some people are just not my customer. So I think it comes with time.
Amazing. So it's been 6 years since you started this journey. I didn't give you this question in prep, but I don't think I'll be stumping you here. How has this changed things for your family, right? I would imagine for children to see parents building something from the ground up and something that's so personal can be so empowering. What a wonderful lesson. So what does this mean for your family?
It is so important for our family. My father was an entrepreneur. He, worked for himself his whole life. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. So coming from that and now being able to share those moments with my own children, it brings me so much joy, kind of keeping on our family legacy of entrepreneurship. My grandfather had a restaurant bar called Greentop, and that's kind of how we came up with the name of paying homage to him, and our family started entrepreneurship. So it was a place of celebration in our community. Obviously, I didn't get to go to it because it's a long time ago. So for me, it's so important because my children get to see it firsthand. My dad took me to every meeting and every zoning court, wherever he went in his entrepreneurship journey, he took me along. And it really helped me to see all the things he did, the inner workings, and how hard he worked. And now my son is 7, and he asks me every day when he comes home, Mommy, what did we sell today? And so he's totally into it. And he understands that we have a business and a website. And I think that also comes from me dragging him to the warehouse, or him going with me to see, the stuff being put in production, or picking up stuff, when I tell him at night, okay, you have to go to bed because I have a call with China and I have to talk to people. So he's always listening and understanding. And my 3-year-old thinks anytime I am on my phone, if I'm recording her, she thinks she's on Instagram Live. She's like, hi, Greentop. So it's hilarious.
Amazing. So what's next? What do we need to be on the lookout in terms of what's coming next for Greentop Gifts?
We have some exciting partnerships that I cannot talk about yet, but the ink's almost dry on the contracts that are coming up. So there's a lot of fun partnerships in the back half of the year, and some places that you can shop us that'll be new. And I can't wait to email and share those with you soon. But for right now on our site, we do have all of our baby shower products. That's kind of the last thing that we just launched, and I'm super excited about those. So there's some new stuff coming down the pipeline.
All right. So we're going to have you back on to talk about those new announcements once they're public and we can celebrate them. But I think it's a really good example of how things are always changing, right, with a business, and how quickly things can change. So next time we chat, you're going to have so much more to talk about.
Yes. Can't wait to talk about it.
Amazing. Jacquelyn, this has been fabulous. It's been really wonderful to get to know you a little bit better. I did not know the story about the name Greentop Gifts, and so I'm going to tell you to share that more. So much opportunity for you to share that in content and on your website, because I saw the information about your dad being an entrepreneur, but the connection to the name, talk about that more. I think that's a wonderful homage to your dad and to having grown up in an entrepreneurial household. So thank you for sharing that piece with us.
Of course, thank you.
All right. everyone, like, go check out Greentop Gifts, learn more about Jacquelyn, and let's stay tuned for all the exciting updates that are coming.